Yeah, shout out to Valeria, my best friend. She made that for me for my birthday
No
a
way.
couple of years back. Yeah, so she painted all of that, right? Traced it and then painted over it, and then in the back she like taped long LED strips. So it looks really sick, and she put those drill holes at the top so that I could hang it.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, and for a long time I didn't have it hanging anywhere because I just didn't know where it made sense. And then once we got this set up, I was like, this is the spot. This makes the most sense. So I'm excited to have it up. It's just a nice little piece for everybody to like watch if you're watching the YouTube video.
Right. What a friend.
That's
awesome.
Yeah, she rocks. Shout out to Valeria. But yeah, McKendrick Bearden, you ready to go? Ready to get this thing started?
Yeah, I'm going to make sure I have this in my pocket. I'm ready.
Sweet. So let's talk about something Orzabal. What was his name?
Roland
Orzabal, one half of Tears for Fears, which is the album you picked. Songs from the Big Chair. What made you want to pick this album?
I think just really great songwriting. I think the arrangements are really amazing. I think Head Over Heels has like one of the grooviest bass lines like in pop music or from that era that people don't really notice or talk about. I just think it's really cool. I don't know.
Dude, there's so many classics. I mean, starting with Shout. Yeah. For some reason, Shout didn't hit me as hard as Everybody Wants to Rule the World and what's the Head Over Heels.
Yeah.
But I've come around to it. I think I just heard it in too many like 80s shows or something. And then, but when you really listen to it in the context of the album, you're like, this is a great opening track.
I mean, yeah, it's a great, I mean, yeah, even like Everybody Wants to Rule the World, that like shuffle drum beat. There's just a lot of cool shit on it that kind of feels so natural. You don't really think about it, but if you like sat down, like dissected it musically, it's like really sophisticated in a really cool way.
Yeah. And it's produced so well. Like you can hear every sound so perfectly. My dad told me he heard somewhere, and I don't know if this is 100% true, but he heard that, what's the song? Everybody Wants to Rule the World was like considered the most popular 80s song of all time by like radio play and sync things, something like that, based on all these stats that was like the most popular or like the best.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, okay, that's good. I'm glad it beat out a Def Leppard song or something like that. I shit on Def Leppard a little too much on this podcast, but they got a lot going on me, so maybe I should chill out on that.
I'll take Tears for Fears over Def Leppard.
Oh, so. Yeah. I mean, every time. But McKendrick Bearden, thank you for joining me for our episode of On That Note. If you're listening, you can also watch on YouTube. So you put out Bright as the Mind's Out, your debut album, February 24th, not that long ago. How does it feel to have it out now?
Feels pretty good.
I know you started it back in 2020. So it's been a long time coming.
Yeah. I think feels, or like it always feels, I feel like kind of anticlimactic in a way. You know, it's like something that's been like close to you and really only you know it. It's like you raised this thing and then you let it out in the world, and then I don't know, it just always kind of feels, I'm always shocked by the feeling of like after you release something, you're just kind of like, oh, well, that's cool, I'm just ready to do the next thing.
Yeah, you expect to wake up and it's like a brand new day and this new glow, and then you realize it's just another day for the most part.
Yeah, I feel like it always kind of like severs the attachment to it, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's like something that you felt like so, like I said, like so close to, and then it's just kind of all of a sudden it's like that like tether is cut, and then you're kind of like ready to just like try something else or move on to the next thing, and that's always an interesting feeling.
Yeah, and the fact that you've been sitting on something for so long, thinking about it for a long time, so that when it's finally out, it's usually been a while and you're not really in that honeymoon phase of it anymore.
Yeah.
And then it's weird when other people hear it and in their head they had no idea that you had that stuff in you.
Right.
But you're like, I've had this here the whole time.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
It's a weird feeling of being seen, but also being seen finally for the person you were like 2 years ago.
Yeah, definitely. I haven't really thought about it in those terms, but yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah. It's like, wouldn't it be nice if we could just put out something like the day we felt it?
I mean, that was kind of the original intent, and then I just didn't.
So what do you mean? Were you trying to put it out like in 2020, right after you started?
I think, well, I mean, I say that in the sense of like, I didn't really have any plans to like try to like shop it around, or like, I just was going to put it out sooner than later, and then life just kind of happened and I didn't, you know. And then I just got to a point where I was like, I'd kind of forgotten about it. And then I got to a point where I was like, oh yeah, I should put that out, you know.
So you were sitting on those songs for a while before you really planned out putting them out.
Well, not yeah, sitting on the recordings, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it was really just for me at the time, because like 2020 was so fucked and I didn't really have my bands. And then it was like something I'd always thought about doing, but I didn't really see the point of, or I never thought of like, or I didn't see the point of like pursuing like a solo thing. I just wasn't, like, I like the idea of like making a record, but I didn't really have like an ambition to pursue that super hard. And I think it was just kind of like out of necessity. Like I just didn't really have another option in the way, like, you know, there was another option to make music.
Because we weren't going out and seeing people very much.
So, I mean, yeah, just kind of like, I kind of just did it for me, I guess, is the point, or like almost as like a challenge to myself or something. And then I like took a job where I was like traveling a bunch. So I spent like the majority of 2021 or late 2021, like most of 2022, like on the road traveling. And then,
are you the guitar tech for?
Yeah, well, I was a guitar tech for the Drive-By Truckers. For about a year. And then I left that gig, and that was kind of when I was like, oh yeah, I should like, or like, what am I going to do? Or like, what am I going to focus on? And I was like, oh, well, I have this thing. I should just put it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was that experience like doing the guitar tech for them?
Oh man, it was awesome.
Have you ever done that before?
No. No. Steep learning curve. I'd kind of started teaching myself like how to do like really simple repairs on guitars during the pandemic and like do setups and stuff.
Yeah.
And then my friend Ben, who actually mixed the record, he was the monitor engineer for them, and they needed a guitar tech. And he actually had a dream that I was doing it. He had never thought of it before and was like, oh yeah, I should just ask McKendrick.
It came to him in a dream?
Yeah. He said he had a dream that I was on the road with them.
That's awesome.
And he was like, oh yeah. He was like, he can do this. He was like, he's not doing anything.
His unconscious was telling him.
Yeah. So I went and did that for years. Great. It was really cool getting to know the people in that band, and kind of became like a family. Also just like seeing how a band operates at that level, which is like something I'd never seen before, you know?
Yeah.
And just kind of watching that, like the ins and outs of every day. And
what did you learn about that?
I think I learned that it's like, I guess like in your mind, you always assume that like these people who are in these positions they're so much further along in their career that like, everything's like figured out.
Yeah.
And it was like really nice to see that they're like still a band the way that I'm in a band, or, you know, or like,
yeah,
it kind of seemed the same, just like a a little different context, you know?
Maybe internally it's the same. It's just the external fact of traveling constantly.
For sure.
Bigger venues probably.
I mean, I will say that one of the biggest things I learned from, you know, especially just like, because, you know, I'm on stage every night with them, and I'm like, I've watch every show. It's like watching a band like that kind of navigate like issues that arise, or just like watching their showmanship, you know. It's like the experience of that, like watching it so up close, it's kind of amazing. You know, it's like they don't have set lists.
They don't have a set list.
No, I mean, they play for like over 2 hours every night, and they don't have set lists. You know, it's like,
wow.
Yeah, they have like Patterson and Cooley, the two singers, like trade off songs for the whole set. And it's like either one of them just starts playing a song. There's like a 4-bar intro that's just guitar. And so they'll just start playing something. The whole band just gets ready.
That's so cool.
Or they have like hand signals.
Right.
That like just like flash a hand signal to the band.
Wow.
I mean, it's
I'm
like,
guessing they've been around a long time.
Yeah,
to be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, apparently, I think they kind of got that idea from James Brown, like how he like operated with his band.
I know Bruce Springsteen will do that. He'll go out with no set, and just kind of call it out.
I think that they really admire like people from that era of performing and showmanship, but it's like that was kind of mind blowing. And I mean, it just was like very rock and roll in the coolest way. You know, but they could just roll with the punches in a way that like people without that experience just can't do. You know?
Yeah, I'm sure cool. Years and years on the road will help that.
Yeah. It was awesome.
That is cool. So getting back to your debut album, Bright as the Mind's Out, what was the writing and the recording process behind this? I know it was a couple of years ago when you were writing and recording it, but what was your typical formula maybe, or was there even a formula? Was each one kind of different in its own way?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think when I started writing, you know, like this batch of songs or from like that year that I'd set out to like make a record. I think it was just like something to occupy my time with. It was kind of like just started like a song at a time, and I think things were so, I mean, like, you know, the world was like so gnarly and just kind of like seemed like so like hell-bent on just like self-destruction. And then, you know, I like developed a pretty like gnarly panic disorder, and had a pretty rough time. So I think it was kind of like an act of like self-soothing, or like trying to just like fill the time. And yeah, I didn't really have a goal set out. I just kind of started just recording them kind of one by one at home. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, like I have enough here to where I can like kind of shape a record out of, you know?
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it happened.
Do you think it was helpful to not really have a specified goal of when you wanted to have these out?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'd necessarily say helpful, but I would say, you know, it kind of felt like for the first time, like I was making music like the way I did when I was a kid, like in high school, when I had like really, really like minimal, like terrible home recording, like a cassette recorder or whatever, and like kind of just doing it kind
just
of
to
for
see
like
what you could come up with.
Yeah, or just like the magic of like hearing something played back,
right?
You know, and like toying with those ideas. And I felt really in touch with maybe like a younger version of myself in a way I hadn't in years. So that was pretty helpful. I don't know how helpful it was, but it was like a nice feeling, you know?
Yeah, because I could see how usually having a goal makes you finish it quicker because you're like, I have to have it done. I made this promise to myself, or I made this promise to somebody else. But especially in 2020, when we didn't quite know where the world was heading and how much time we would really have to ourselves, that is kind of a nice way to just take some pressure off and kind of ease through the creative process of something like this, and not necessarily have an end goal.
Yeah, for sure.
So I know you wrote all the songs and you recorded all of them. Would you say you produced the whole thing as well?
Yeah, I would say that.
That's crazy. Because, I mean, this is, I listened to it a few days ago, and it really is one of the most creative projects I've heard come out of Athens since I moved here like a year ago.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
thanks.
I mean, and I'm a big Heffner fan. You guys are awesome. And maybe part of it is because I'm in this certain era of like what I really like to listen to. One of them being Sparkle Horse.
Sure.
I just discovered him. So then, like, when I found your album, I was like, yo, this is like, it's like it was tailor made for my listening tastes right now.
That's cool.
Yeah. So I have a lot of questions about, little things in the album. Just all the sounds in general. What musical influences were you pulling from when it comes to like soundscapes and things like that?
Yeah, I think I'm sorry, I'm trying to think of a way to phrase this without sounding really, I don't want to sound like super pretentious.
That's totally cool.
I'm also gonna, sorry, I'm gonna refresh my nicotine habit.
You're good.
I'm sure you know if you've had Taylor Cotton on here.
We did it on Zoom one before I moved to Athens.
Oh no, Taylor was probably like off camera. Like
yeah, he probably was. I didn't know that. That was funny. My buddy, shout out to Wes, he had that, and he asked if I wanted them. I was like, no, I'm good. But it wasn't nicotine, it was caffeine. Do you know about this?
No.
It's like literally just, it's not nicotine, but it's a pouch with caffeine in it. And I thought he was lying to me to get me to try it, but he wasn't. It really was caffeine. And
yeah, I guess they're similar.
I guess it kind of had a bit of an effect, but also that could have been a placebo situation.
Yeah, Jesus Christ.
I know. But anyway, as you were saying.
Anyway, I think I really like things that are like kind of like slightly like left of center. You know, I feel like if I'm listening like a lot of bands or a lot of records, if I listen to, I feel like I'm always listening for that like what I would call like ear prick moments.
Mm-hmm.
That are like what is like
the moment that makes you go like, huh?
Yeah, or like a strange sound, or like, wow, that's like a really interesting sound. Like, where did that come from? Or like, that's an interesting place to put it in the music.
Yeah.
I think, I love Brian Eno. Like, I love a lot of the sounds on his records, and I think that's like a really big influence. Or like, at the time, I'm trying to think what I was listening to. I was probably listening to like a lot of like Robert Wyatt, which is this guy. He had this band with this other guy, Kevin Ayers, called the Soft Machine.
Okay, that
from
sounds
the 60s.
Familiar. Oh, it's from the 60s.
Yeah,
wow.
It's a long time ago. But I think it might have been early 70s. But both those guys like made tons of solo records, and they're kind of out there, but there's also like great songs on them. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm trying to think of what I was listening to back then, but I don't quite remember. But yeah, but you know,
Eno's a good one for sure in terms of pulling from the well of creativity.
Yeah.
That guy is very interesting.
For sure. Or, you know, like, I think I just always love, like, music that's, like, song oriented and then, or, like, songwriting oriented. And then there's kind of always some, like, left of center element to it. Like, I know this is probably a cliche example, but, like, Wilco's a perfect example of that.
Right. Yankee Hotel Foxtrot. He had a quote in have you ever seen the documentary?
I'm Trying to Break Your Heart.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's a part of it where he says he's being interviewed by, I don't know if it's press people or just a meet and greet after the show, and they're asking him about the new album, and it's not out yet.
Right.
And they're like, is it more like this or more like that? And he's like, well, it's not really like either of those. It's the songs that have like holes in them. Yeah. And that made me think exactly of your song, is it On Heels? Where there's like out of nowhere this meditative bridge, and I thought the song was over or it like went to a new one, and then it's like that for like 30 seconds, and then it comes back into the song where it stopped, and I was like, whoa, just like one of those ear prick moments.
Yeah.
It was very cool. Was that intentional from the jump, or did it just happen and you're like, oh, let's keep rolling with this?
No. I mean, I wrote it on acoustic guitar, so like I just always had that middle section. And really what I was trying to do, and I don't think it actually comes across well at all, but I was trying to mimic this television song, like in the middle of it, like kind of this song called 1880 or so. And
I don't know that one.
Is
it on the Marquee Moon album?
No. It's on a record from from the early 90s of theirs.
Whoa. I didn't know they were still doing stuff then.
Yeah. It's kind of like the hit from that record. But instead of like, you know, there's like a single line thing, and I was like voicing it with chords, and I was like trying to kind of mimic that as kind of like a tongue-in-cheek thing, and I don't think it comes across at all. But it was just like kind of fun for me, and I was like, I could like bring it down for a minute and kind of do this like really pretty like chord melody of this television song, or like a nod to it, and just, I don't know, just like it. I just always played it that way on an acoustic guitar. I never thought about it, and just and then when I went to record it, it kind of turned way more into like a, you know, like acid moment or something. You know? Like blooms out and gets like really psychedelic or something, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, it's a cool way to take a break almost from what you've been listening to. I don't know. I love things like that because they seem more human, I guess. Like in reality, we can be having this conversation, and if you consider this conversation a song, then a moment like that meditative moment in your song could be the moment where you zone out and you start thinking of something else while you're talking to somebody. And it's just like a more human way of forming a song. It's like in real life, it's typically not, you know, verse, chorus.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like there are little holes in these weird moments that happen in life. So when you hear those in songs, it's such an interesting way to listen to something.
Yeah, well that's a cool way to think about it. I never had. But yeah, I mean, for sure. But it's like, it just wasn't really, I didn't put a lot of thought into that moment in that song. It just kind of was how I always played it on guitar.
Yeah.
And then just it kind of, on the record, it fleshed itself out in kind of a different way. But yeah.
What was the most challenging song that you had to put on this album? Like, what gave you the most trouble?
I mean, maybe that one.
Oh, really?
Either that one or maybe Shoulder of Joy. Mm-hmm. I only say that because we remixed that one a couple times. But yeah, I don't know. Like, On Heels is actually like my least favorite song on that record.
Oh, interesting.
Like, I wanted to not put it on there. And
why?
Then I just was like, I don't remember. I just remember after it was like all said and done and we were in the mixing process, and or when we'd finished mixing, I was like, I should just cut this. It doesn't really fit. And Ben Hackett was like, who mixed the record, was kind of like, I wouldn't say adamant, but he like pushed me towards it. He was like, no, he's like, I think it like, he's like, I think it bridges like some gaps. He's like, I think you should have it on there. He's like, I think it has a purpose and you should leave it on there. And I was like, okay.
I roll.
Yeah, I was like, I'll listen to you, fine.
That's so funny. It kind of reminds me of like a Beach Fossils vibe.
Yeah.
But not as like peppy.
Yeah, sure. I could see that.
A little more relaxed.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was probably like, I think probably when I wrote that, I was listening to a lot of like Steve Gunn and like Weather Station.
I've never listened to either of those.
Oh, you should check it out. It's great. Weather
Is
Station.
Steve Gunn in a project, or is it just his name?
No, yeah, he's just like a really cool songwriter. I mean, really cool records, but like kind of like a, like one of those like modern kind of guitar hero kind of dudes.
Okay.
Or like guitar anti-hero. Weather Station's like a Canadian band. It's primarily one songwriter. Her songs are unreal. I love her music.
I've heard of the Weather Station, but don't know anything by them.
Yeah, I was probably listening to like a lot of that stuff and was trying to. That song's probably like an internalization of more like acoustic driven kind of.
Do you know the band Merchandise?
That name sounds familiar, but I can't place it.
They have an album called After the End that I listened to a lot, like my senior year of high school, and a couple of your songs, especially that one on Heels, kind of reminded me of them. But they're not like that big. I think they stopped after that one album.
Okay.
So it was like I hadn't even thought about that album until I listened to that song. I was like, oh shit, I used to listen to that album all the time.
Cool.
Yeah, I think you would dig it.
I'll check it out.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I actually have the vinyl of it. Really weird cover. It's like I'll show you, but sound Shoulders of Joy or Shoulder of Joy. I was really curious. What made me think of Brian Eno when you said that was the weird bell sounds. What's going on there? It's like bells or flutes or something.
Oh, like that kind of like middle section. Yeah. It's a combination of a couple things. It's a prepared guitar.
What's that?
So have you ever heard of like a prepared piano where they'll like put like nuts and bolts and like weird things? Like,
yeah.
So you can do similar things to a guitar, but it's much simpler than that. It's like if you I wove like a paper clip in between the strings and like push it close to the bridge, and kind of all of a sudden it sounds like bells or like a kalimba. It makes your
a little more jangly.
Yeah, but it like brings all these bizarre overtones and kind of pushes your guitar kind of out of tune in a really interesting way.
Huh.
So it's like a combination of like that sound and then like flute and clarinet kind of doubling it, and it's just like a blended sound between that.
Did you get real flutes or clarinets? Because I couldn't tell if it was real flutes or if it was a mellotron.
Yeah. So it was both.
Okay.
Ben Hackett played clarinet on it, and then it's like real clarinet, and then it's like sampled clarinet and sampled flute kind of blended together.
Wild.
Yeah. And it's just like the way all this sounds. Like I'm really big into like taking multiple instruments in unison, and kind of like when you're mixing, like blending it to make it sound like one instrument almost, or that like you can't really, it's like that's like, what is that sound? I can't tell exactly what that is.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I was trying to do, and I really like that.
Yeah, well, you succeeded, because I really was trying to figure out. I was like, is this, it sounds mellotron, but it's not as smooth as a mellotron, and it's also not as like rough as like a real clarinet or something.
Yeah. It's just like, it's kind of all that stuff, and just a couple weird things, and then just kind of blended together.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite song, or a song you're most proud of? A song you're most surprised by?
Yeah, probably the last song on the record. I don't know if I'd say it was like my favorite, but when I first started working on that song, I thought it was just going to be like just like a little acoustic track at the end of the record. I wasn't really planning on fleshing it out, or it like made more sense to me just like being this really simple acoustic thing. And then I started kind of building on it, and then it just turned into what it was. I mean, I guess that was the most surprising one to me.
Yeah.
It just ended up the way it did on its own, and I didn't really I feel like a lot of the songs I had a plan for. Like in my head, I could hear what I wanted it to be, and that song just turned into something different. And I feel like also when you're working on stuff in a recording process, you kind of have to like listen to what the song wants to do. I think people get into a lot of trouble when they're sort of fighting against like what it's telling you it needs to be.
Yeah.
And I think that one just was like, oh, it's going to be like sort of this like really arranged borderline orchestral suite at the end of the song, at the end of the record,
Yeah.
And so that was kind of fun just to like go where it wanted me to go. Yeah.
I just read this quote or little chapter from the Rick Rubin book that I have read over there. And it was about collaboration and how all art is it's not yours. It's a collaboration between you and the universe, between you and whatever you're creating. And that totally makes sense. You might in your head think it's going to be this one thing. And if you force that, that's just like trouncing on your quote unquote partner, which is the universe trying to tell you, hey, I think it should be this. And if you really listen to that and work with it, you end up creating something that at the end of the day you can listen to and you're like, I can't believe I made this. This is not something I would have ever expected of myself.
I mean, it sounds really woo woo, but I love thinking about things like that.
Totally.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, it's like I kind of agree with like Rick Rubin's ideas about that. Like you're just sort of like a conduit for something else that's just kind of, you tap into it and you're kind of like at the service of this other like higher power that's wants you to communicate something to the world. Or that sounds so crazy, but I kind of believe it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a beautiful way of viewing it.
And I think you just like get into a lot of, and I just know it from experience. I think you just get into a lot of trouble when you don't, like when you kind of fight against that,
Right.
I think it always kind of turns out worse.
Yeah. Well, when you listen to your intuition and it tells you, hey, let's throw a 1.5 minute long meditative track right here.
Right.
Maybe give it a shot. You never know.
Yeah. Or just, I think a lot of times people try to like exert a ton of control over their music or art or whatever they're doing. And I think it's like, you can have a clear idea about something, but it's like, it's like really you're like subservient to it. Like you actually don't have that much control over it. Mm-hmm. And so I think when you kind of recognize that, I think some cool things happen,
Yeah. And not that I have a child, but I feel like it reminds me of maybe how being a parent might feel, where you do all your best to raise this child, and then it gets to the point where it's cognizant enough to make its own decisions and have its own opinions, and you can force your opinions down their throat and what you think they should do, but at the end of the day they might end up rebelling against that simply because you told them to. Whereas if you let them figure it out, they might discover something that you might not have known, and maybe you learn from that as well. It's like these songs are their own beings in their own right.
Yeah, I'm sure. I don't have children either, but I'm sure that there's some element of that. It's probably a very trippy experience.
Yeah, I would imagine. Also, shout out to the train. Always have to come in and let us know
Yeah.
that it's here. But
That train, it's funny, that train is actually on the record.
is it really? Where?
Yeah.
Where on the record?
There's a song called Silvering, and at
Yeah,
the very
yeah.
end of the song, you hear this. I mean, no one probably hears it, but it like pops in. I used to live over on Nantahala, and there's like 2 songs on the record that are like pretty old. They're like I built off demos from like. I'm always like have fragments of things. I have like I'm always like recording little demos, and for the most part, I would never like go backwards and like use something from a former time or from that long ago. It's probably like 6 or 7 years ago. But there was just like 2 songs that I was like, oh, I still really like those. I want people to hear them. It was like I was a lot younger when I wrote them, but I was like, oh, they should be on the record. But Silvering is like even the vocals and stuff, like the guitar, it's all like a demo from like maybe like 2015 or something. It's like a long time ago.
Wow.
I just like dug it up and was like, or maybe I found it on a hard drive and was like, oh yeah, I still like that song. But when I was demoing it, when I lived over in Nantahala, a long time ago, there's like the train is on there.
Right.
And I just left it in.
That's sick. I didn't notice that.
It's I don't think anyone would notice but me.
Okay. Yeah.
But it kind of like falls in rhythmically. There's kind of like this, like bump bump. You hear the horn go off.
Oh, that's funny.
Train. Yeah.
I wrote down. I don't know if this is what it was. There's a sound around 2 minutes and 5 seconds. I said, sounds like old clocks being smashed in the best way possible. I don't know.
Was that Silvering?
It isn't Silvering.
Oh, was
yeah.
it like the bridge that really like crazy sound?
Yeah. I mean, it sounded to me like a grandfather clock being thrown down the stairs or something.
Yeah. It's actually cello mixed with like a sampled auto harp.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
It's like my friend Marta played the cello part, and then so there's like a thing on the record you'll hear. I mean, I don't know if you'd hear it, but it's like I would take something from one song. Like my friend Paul sent me a bunch of percussion tracks for On Heels, and there's like an auto harp thing he did that's like kind of tucked in, and I like basically like went in that audio file and like clipped it, and then basically made like stretched out over a keyboard and made like a sample instrument out of that.
Yeah.
And so I used that sample in that song.
Gotcha.
There's like a bunch of things like that on the record where it's like a lot of the weird stuff you hear is like a sample of something else from another song. That I liked a moment of and just like clipped it and then made like a sample instrument.
I would imagine that has a like a subconscious feeling of cohesion that isn't even really planned.
Yeah. I mean maybe it might be more planned than you'd think, but it kind of did that so much to where I was like, oh, it's kind of like a cool little, like no one would know, but it's like everything's kind of connected in a way. I liked that. Or I like just like, again, like it's not, I highly doubt that that's communicated, but for me, it was kind of like a fun thing to know that all these songs kind of like have some sort of thread and they kind of use pieces of each other,
Right. It's like creating your own universe where everything is interconnected in some way.
Yeah, for sure.
What was the experience like sequencing it? Because I feel like it's very well paced. Did you always know, or was it?
No.
Did you have to play around with it a lot?
I didn't know, and I didn't have to play around with it very much. I just remember when Ben and I finished mixing it, I think I might have only done 1 or 2 sequences, and they weren't that different. It was like maybe like the one I landed on, I just had like flipped a couple songs in the sequence, but I just remember like showing Ben the sequence. I was like, what do you think about this? And he Yeah, it makes sense to me. It wasn't really, I didn't deliberate very much. It just kind of felt really natural.
It was interesting starting out with Grace Henderson, like basically a 1.5 2-minute long meditation. I know I've said that word so many times, but it is like it's a really interesting way to ease into it, and then rock your socks off with Continental.
Yeah,
right,
I mean, that was very planned.
Yeah.
I liked the idea of like somebody listening to it for the first time. And also the way I had it mastered was that first track is a lot quieter than the next one.
Yeah.
And I kind of wanted somebody to have to be like, oh, like, what is this? And like kind of turn it up and be like, oh, like this is kind of weird, or not even weird, or like, okay, like I know what this is or something, and then just like slams in with this like Dinosaur Jr. kind of thing.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
I like that. I like that stuff in records where they kind of like play with your perception and expectation.
Yes, yeah. It's always fun when you think you're getting one thing, and then by the next song you're like, oh, okay, interesting, and that hooks me at least. When somebody me too. Plays with my intentions, or not intentions, what's the word? My expectations.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I love that stuff.
And also maybe this is me being like conspiracy brain, like trying to make connections where maybe there's not. But I thought it was an interesting observation that Grace Henderson, the first track, both at the same time, last track, they both start with panned guitars in like a strange way. Was that intentional, or did it just end up that way?
It just kind of ended up that way.
Interesting.
Or maybe it's a little bit of both. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard. It was like so long ago too, so it's like hard for me to like put myself in in my place at that time, or like think or like imagine my intentions, but I think everything just kind of like just happened in a really natural way. And like, maybe I was thinking about, I don't think I chose to do that when I was like working on the last song. I don't think I chose to be like, oh, I need to make it like the first one. I think my intuition was like, oh, I want to like pan the guitars. And then I was like, oh, it's like this other one, and I was like, oh, well, I kind of wanted to bookend them anyway.
Yeah. So they just kind of happen.
Yeah, for sure.
That's like listening to your intuition and not forcing one thing because you think it should be a certain way. And what's can be weird about that is you don't know why you feel a certain way, and then it hits you later.
Right.
I feel like that happens with me with lyrics sometimes. I'm like, why would I write this thing? It doesn't really quite make sense right now.
Right.
And then later you for some reason make some connection, and you're like, oh wait, that actually is way cooler than anything I would have intentionally wrote, because it just hits some unconscious part of yourself.
Yeah. I definitely get behind that.
Yeah. Well, I could keep poking and prodding on the nuances of this album, but we can move on to the live show at Cine.
Oh, cool.
I wish I could have gone. I'm kicking myself that I didn't get to go because I was in Atlanta. But what was that experience like? I loved the set. They had the bells hanging from the ceiling. What was that experience like?
Man, it was really fun. It was cool, like working it out live, and it was different, but in a way, I don't really like. I don't like the idea of like being married to like you have to perform the way your record is. I think that a live performance of a song versus a recorded thing, or there's like wildly different beasts, and so it was like fun to kind of reimagine some of them, or to figure out like how do we accomplish the same feeling with a slightly different arrangement, or just kind of like like on both at the same time. Like on the recording, it's like every pass through the progression there's like another thing added, and of course we couldn't do that, but it's like how do we mimic it, and like, so that was really fun. I mean, I had like a 9-piece band including
Crazy.
me.
What instruments did you have? You have guitar, bass, drums.
Yeah, so it was two guitars, sometimes 4 guitars.
Damn.
But yeah, so sorry, I'm gonna think about the stage plot and I'll go that way. So I had Jay Gonzalez on keyboards and he played guitar on a song. Had Graham Powers on guitar. I had 3 string players: Marty Kelleher, Jordy Laura, and Will Ruff. And then Ryan Engelberger played bass. Andrew McFarlane played drums, and then Ben Hackett played guitar and like a myriad of woodwinds and all kinds of, so it was like a pretty big setup to kind of accomplish as well as we could, like a lot of the sounds you hear on the record. I don't know how often I would do that.
Or just logistically getting everybody to be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of more of an event, but it was really fun, and I'm lucky enough to have a lot of really sweet friends in my life that were willing to help me, bring it to life and put it together. It was great, and the visual, like Nick Gould, who is like the technical director at Cine. He spent years on the road as a lighting director.
Oh, wow.
For like some like pretty cool acts, like pretty big acts, and like he was like super willing. Like I made the bells because I had this idea of like, I want to like kind of recreate the album cover on a bigger scale and like projection map onto that, but I don't know anything about that. Mm-hmm. Like visual world is like, I can't even, I don't know. It's just not my thing. It's not my wheelhouse.
Right.
But he was like super cool, and he kind of did put all that together and was like down, and he spent a lot of time making it look really great. So it's kind of felt like an event, which is kind of my goal, to just, because like, I don't know how often I'm gonna play the stuff out, and so like wanted the release to feel like a production.
Yeah. Dude, I'm just really pissed I wasn't there. Now you're saying like, I don't know if it'll ever happen again. I'm like, fuck.
I mean, it'll happen, but maybe not to that scale.
Right. It just looks so cool. And now that I've like really familiarized myself with the album, it would have been really cool to see that live.
Well, I'll have to do it again now.
Yeah. See, now you have to do it. But yeah, dude, it looks really sick. And the other thing I would love to get into was the Continental music video.
Oh, sure.
Did you do the stop motion yourself?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It was wild.
Yeah, it was really,
How long did that take?
not as long as you would think, but I probably also was like having a manic episode or something.
Okay.
Honestly, the thing that took the longest was like making everything and cutting it out.
Yeah.
Because I made all that stuff from construction paper.
Right.
So it's like, it was more like making the scenes and the figures and stuff. Like that I probably worked on that like 4 hours or so every night for about like 5 nights. And then the actual like shooting of it, maybe I think I did that over the course of like 2 days.
Oh, wow. That's not as much as I would have thought.
Yeah, I kind of planned it out. You just kind of have to do some like simple math for how many frames you need.
Right.
And I kind of like blocked it out, and I had like I just did it all on my iPhone. Mm-hmm. Just like had a tripod and like a remote trigger, and just kind of busted out. I was like, I need a video. I was like, I don't really have any money or time.
Yeah.
So I was like, I've done stop motion when I was in college. I was like, I kind of remember how to do it. I was like, I should just do something like that. It won't be that big of a deal. It's like took forever.
Of course. But no, it paid off. It looks super professional, first of all. I wouldn't have thought, I might have guessed it was filmed on an iPhone just because of like the aspect ratio, I think.
Sure.
But the quality of it certainly is much larger than the budget.
Yeah.
And I loved like this kind of the story it was telling. In an article on, I think it was Flagpole, it mentioned how that song was kind of about your like those manic episodes, those panic episodes, and
Yeah.
how it like I love starts off with like those creepy ass hands like coming
Yeah.
into the hallway, and it's like that feeling of just panic in your own home.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you did a very great job like bringing that idea to life in a very creative way.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad that came across.
It did. Yeah. Yeah. Do you think you'd ever do another stop motion video?
Oh, Jesus. I don't know. Maybe.
One of these days, possibly.
Yeah. I kind of was joking with Taylor Cotton about that after I did it. I was like, there's a part of me that's worried. And of course this didn't happen, but I was like, there is a part of me that was like worried, like friends would see it or be like, "Oh, can you do that for me?" And I'd just be like, "No."
Yeah. Well, let me
Like,
take the time to ask you now on the podcast. Would you make me one? I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
Yeah, I think the money would have to be right.
They're pretty substantial. Yeah. Name the price.
Yeah, the carrot would have to be pretty big at the end of the stick.
All right. Well, everybody hit up McKendrick Bearden for free music videos.
Yeah, please. Yeah, endless time and resources. So
Right.
yeah.
Right. Cool, man. Well, that's going to take us over to the last 5. I'm just going to ask you 5 quick questions and we'll be done. Number 1 is in the studio or playing live. Which do you prefer?
Studio.
Mm-hmm. I'm the same way. It's nice to just kind of be in your own space and create something that just didn't exist.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I love them both, but if I had to choose one for the rest of my life, it would be studio.
Absolutely. Question number 2 is, what do you think is a perfect album front to back?
I should have this in my back pocket. Perfect album front to back.
You can name a few as well.
Sure. Oh, these are gonna be bad answers, but I'll just go for it. Pet Sounds, for sure.
It's classic.
Lost in Space by Amy Mann. I'll say that.
I don't know that one. Amy Mann, was she in a band? Or was it just her?
She was in the 80s. She had a band called Till Tuesday that had a pretty big radio hit. Actually, they toured with Tears for Fears.
Oh.
Her music is not really anything like that now.
Mm-hmm.
She's like one of my favorite songwriters. I would say she's like maybe top 5 living songwriters.
Wow.
But she has a record, Lost in Space. I would say that one.
Okay. I'll check that one out.
Damn, this is fucking me up.
I know it's a hard one.
I mean, it's like, but it's things I've thought about. Like, I'll hear a record and be like, this is perfect.
Sure.
And then
Somebody asks you and they all go away.
Yeah. Definitely, I would say A Ghost is Born by Wilco. That's like...
Really? That's the Wilco album you
Yeah.
pick? That's the one I've tried time and time again to be like, let me give this one a shot. And I get like 3 songs in. I'm like, I just want to listen to a different one.
Yeah, that's my favorite one.
Wow.
I don't think it's like perfect front to back.
What's the best song on it to you?
Man.
Bull Black Nova's cool. Handshake Drugs, right? That's one.
Yeah, I do love Handshake Drugs. What is... I don't know, they're all so good. Maybe Hummingbird or Theologians. I guess Theologians is probably my favorite one.
It's hard for me to know which one's which because I haven't listened to it as much as the others.
Yeah, it's a little... It's kind of a harder one. You know, it's like... I think there's something about that record I really respect and love. It was also the first one I really heard of theirs when I was like 18 and kind of fell in love with it. It's like, there's just like a lot of really like beautiful sonics and like kind of challenging moments to it. And it's not, I feel like it doesn't have the like, like Yankee Hotel Foxtrot's always like lauded as like the genius record, but I feel like A Ghost Is Born is like, it takes all that stuff, but then to like a slightly darker place.
Yeah.
And there's something about that I like. Man, I thought of another one and it just left me. Oh my God. I want to give you like two more.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Sometimes it helps to like move on, and then your subconscious picks it back up.
We can move on to the next question.
Yeah, that helps. Question number 3 is, who's your dream artist or producer to work with?
Oh man. Can I list a couple?
Sure, yeah.
I kind of have like my favorite like producers, and they're also, all of my favorite producers are also like songwriters. They all make their own records.
Yeah.
I feel like Chad Van Galen, I would say Jim O'Rourke, I would say John Vanderslice, and Richard Swift, although he's passed away, but he's
finally one I know. I was like, I know Richard Swift. I don't know the other 3.
Oh yeah, you should check them. You should check all those guys out.
Yeah. So they have solo records as well.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll check them out.
I would say like those would be like mind blowing to me to be able to work with them in any way.
Yeah, Richard Swift, I knew because there's a guy in Philadelphia named Rubber Band Gun, and he produced my last EP. And I want to say he worked with Richard Swift a couple of times, or at least because he played with Foxygen, that band.
Yeah.
And I think Foxygen was somehow involved.
Richard Swift produced that like first Foxygen record.
That's right. So that was that connection there.
Yeah.
Richard Swift seems like a very prolific producer that didn't get to like have too much shine during his lifetime.
Yeah, I feel like the people that know is either like people don't really know him, or they're like they love him.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know anybody that's like so on Richard Swift. They like swear by him.
Yeah, I love his records.
So we got Richard Swift. The other 3 you said, Vanderslice.
John Vanderslice, yeah.
Great last name.
Yeah, that's awesome.
What were the other 2?
Chad Van Galen, and who's like a Canadian singer-songwriter. But he's really just kind of weird. I mean, but it's all like pop songs essentially, or like folk songs, but really like interesting production, very DIY, but like builds his own instruments and stuff. He's like very, very cool guy. And then Jim O'Rourke, who like
Jim O'Rourke is wild.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
Speaking of, Ghost Is Born, he produced that.
Right. Yeah. I love the fact that on the Yankee Hotel Foxtrot album, they like brought the mixes to him, and he's the one who really like took these songs and turned them inside out. Like, that's so sick. And then I listened to whatever album of his that it's got like a disco ball on the front.
Is it Simple Songs maybe?
Maybe, yeah. I read that remember. Jeff Tweedy bio train again. Sorry, guys. But in Jeff Tweedy's bio, he said that album for a long period of time was like the one album he had in his car. So he'd listen to it constantly.
Yeah.
And it's like 4 songs, but an hour long or something.
Okay,
so
cool.
It's these like crazy instrumentals.
Yeah, it's not the one I'm thinking. It's not Simple Songs. But yes, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and you do have to really sit with it and allow it to unfold in front of you. But it's worth it. And I still haven't got through the whole thing, but every once in a while I throw it on. I'm like, this is really interesting.
Yeah, he's great.
So I wrote down a couple as well. I'd love to see. Do you know Dave Friedman?
I don't think so.
I don't know if he's actually local to here, but I feel like he can't be that far away because he produced a lot of albums that you know, but you don't know that he produced them, like the Sparkle Horse, It's a Wonderful Life album. I want to say he did stuff with like of Montreal and Granddaddy, and
Okay.
I'm not 100% sure about all of them, but and also Flaming Lips.
Okay, cool.
So he like, if you look at his website, the front page is just like 50 bands that he produced, and at least half of them.
Yeah, he's like a heavy hitter.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll have to ask. My roommate JoJo plays keys for Montreal.
Oh,
so
cool.
I need to.
Don't quote me on that. I don't know if it was a
Well,
Montreal.
no, but I mean, he would know. I mean, he knows so much more about everything than me. So he would know something about it.
Yeah, he's got quite the extensive list. I would definitely see you guys working together, because he'd take some weird albums and makes them very I don't know, they're just very like well produced. Yeah, I think he did the Soft Bulletin by the Flaming Lips.
Okay.
Which I've now like dove into the Flaming Lips. It took me forever to get into them.
That's
and
a
now,
perfect record.
Yeah, Soft Bulletin is absolutely perfect record. Have you seen the Pitchfork documentary? I think it's Pitchfork.
No, the only documentary I've seen of theirs is Fearless Freaks.
I haven't seen that.
It was just about that band. It's not about not about that record. But
yeah.
So there's a Pitchfork documentary about the record.
I think it's Pitchfork. It's on YouTube for free. It's an hour long. I'll send it to you. It's absolutely worth it. And a lot of documentaries can have their own, like they focus on one aspect of something. Like in a band, maybe it's like the relationships or whatever, but this one is really a lot about the recording of it, which to my nerd brain, like I find fascinating.
Yeah.
So
cool.
Definitely think if you're into like all the little sounds, so you're like, how'd they get that? They like really go into detail for stuff like that. I mean,
that's a band that's really good at that kind of stuff. So, I'll have to check that out. It sounds fun.
Yeah, it's really cool. And then a couple other people I wrote down were like Bon Iver.
Sure, yeah.
Brian Eno, who we talked about, and then Panda Bear. I thought would be kind of a cool one.
Yeah, definitely.
Animal Collective has some pretty insane sounds that I feel like they could get.
Yeah, they're great.
Question number 4 is, what's on your musical rotation right now?
I'm actually gonna have to pull out my phone.
Yeah.
Most recently.
This always, literally never fails when I ask that question. Somebody's like, I gotta pull up the Spotify.
Yeah.
Because nobody knows off the top of their head.
I've been listening to came out yesterday, the Benny Honda Super Shifter record.
I saw people posting about that. Is he around here?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, he's the one who mixed my record.
Oh, cool.
But he actually sent me this record when I was talking to him about mixing mine. And we were friends, but he was like, oh, I just finished this. If you want to like hear how like I approach things, like here's the record that I mixed. That's mine,
Yeah.
Kind of fell in love with it. And
so the album's out now?
Mm-hmm. It came out yesterday.
I'll check it out.
Yeah, it's really cool. Let's see. Have some friends out in Denver. They're in a band called Duck Turnstone, and they put out a record around the time I did. It's called Duck Tells a Story.
Duck Turn Song?
Duck Turnstone.
Duck Turnstone.
Really like that one.
Huh, okay.
I'll just give a couple more. Yeah, there's this guy, I'm not going to pronounce this correctly. It's either Eves or Ives Jarvis.
I thought you were going to say Ives Tumor. Do you know him?
No. He has a record called The Zug that is really, really fun.
Yeah.
That new Yellow Tinga record that came out a few weeks ago, I've been listening to a lot. And then Allegra Krieger, who actually opened my show, but she's a New York City artist. Cool. She just happened to be touring down through here, but she put out a record last year called Precious Things that I've like kind of gotten pretty obsessed with.
Okay.
So yeah, I would say those are kind of the things in the last few weeks I've been listening to a lot.
Nice. I'll have to check all those out. I don't think I really know any of those, especially the Benny Honda one if he's from around here.
Yeah, that's great.
Do you know Spirit of the Beehive? Okay. I was like, there's a couple songs that gave me Spirit of the Beehive vibes.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, no, I kind of only know them through Reagan. Like Reagan.
Oh yeah.
I know Reagan's a really big fan, so I've listened to that band with him. Yeah, it's really cool.
Dude, they are not as much on my rotation nowadays, but when their last album came out in 2021, that was like 3 songs on that album were my top 5 listened to of that year on Spotify. I was just like obsessed with them. They have such a crazy ear for experimentation, and I got to see them in Atlanta when they came to Aisle 5. Yeah, they came to Aisle 5, and that was a wild show.
Cool.
I would definitely recommend seeing them if you can.
It's a cool place to see that band.
Yeah, it was pretty full, but we were, anywhere you are, it's pretty intimate. So we got pretty close to the stage and got to see them, and Body Meat opened for them. Do you know who that is?
No.
Great name.
First a great name.
Body Meat.
Yeah.
That is a wild dude to get into. It's like very sample based, almost like it literally feels like like overload, like you're having a robot's having a panic attack or something. It's insane. And like the rhythms are like based on or inspired by like more African type rhythms. So it's like the rhythm of it is not normal to like you or I probably. Yeah. It's like this weird jilted or stilted, I don't know what words I'm using, rhythm to it with just wild sounds. So definitely.
I'll check that out.
Yeah. And then the last question here is, what's your favorite decade of music and what's the worst?
It's interesting. Favorite decade, I'll have to just say the one we're in now.
Nice.
Because I think it's kind of important to be engaged with what's happening around you. So that's something I've learned as I've gotten older. I definitely wouldn't have had that answer a few years ago. Find joy in what's going on around you, I guess. Worst decade of music? I don't know if there is one. There's always bad stuff. There's always good stuff.
Refuse to answer.
Yeah, I can't. I feel like, point to a timeline and you'll find something that's incredible and find something that you don't really care for that much. So
yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah. That's part of the fun of that question is like, as soon as you say something, then you start to talk about it and you're like, well, I'll say 80s and then this album, Tears for Fears, is amazing.
Yeah.
And then my favorite could be, I like to say the 2010s because that's when I really got like heavily into music, but 2020s also could be one by the end of the decade, but 70s is also a great answer. And then within all those, there's just like absolute trash and you can't avoid it.
Yeah. Also, I thought of a couple more records that I think are perfect.
Yes, throw them out.
Alan Toussaint, Summer Nights is perfect front to back. Skylarking by XTC.
Is that an 80s band? Yeah, I don't know them very well.
Check that record out. It's very cool. That's like a band I didn't really care about until like maybe this past year. And kind of like went through and listened to a bunch of it and was just like, how did I miss this?
Yeah.
There's so many great records front to back. Also, David Barbie's record, 10th of Seas, I would say front to back.
I've been told to have David Barbie on the podcast.
Oh, you would love to talk to him.
Yeah.
And he would be a great guest.
Nice. I'll have to reach out. You're like the 4th person to mention him. I didn't know he had his own solo stuff.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He has a record he put out maybe like early 2000s called Comment of the Season. That's really, really good. But the one he put out in like 2017 or 2018, 10th of Seas, is like front to back, like a perfect record.
Wow. Okay, cool. I'll check it out.
Yeah, for sure.
Nice. So is that all the perfect albums we got?
That's all I got, man.
Cool.
That's all I got.
No, you did a good job. You gave a few really good answers, and a lot that I'll have to check out. You gave me some homework. But that's gonna wrap us up here for On That Note. McKendrick Bearden, Bright as the Mind's out. Everybody go check it out. Excited for new Heffner stuff on the way as well. And thank you again for coming on the show, dude.
Yeah, man.
It was
Thanks
a
for
blast.
asking me. Yeah, it was great.
Awesome. Until next time.
If I could be happy.
Thank you again for joining me for another episode of On That Note with Parker Whirling. If you haven't yet, please make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube and Apple Podcasts, and you can even leave a comment down below to let me know who you're listening to. On that note, I'll see you guys next time.